Hello everyone, and welcome to Going the Distance. So in this video I'm going to go over the poem that we read on Monday, and then I'm going to tell you how we're going to use this poem as a means to generate our own poem. So the poem that we read was Love and Friendship by Emily Bronte. Let's take a look. Love is like the wild rose briar. Friendship is like the holly tree. The holly is dark when the rose briar blooms, but which will bloom most constantly? The wild rose briar is sweet in spring, its summer blossoms scent the air. Yet wait till winter comes again, and who will call the wild briar fair? Then scorn the silly rose wreath now, and deck thee with the holly's sheen, that when December blots thy brow, he still may leave thy garland green. So this is a really cool poem that is comparing love and friendship. And it does this cool simile between the rosebriar and the holly. So let's take a look at this play between these two different plants and how those intersect with love and friendship. So the poem opens in the first stanza. So we're talking about the first 4 lines. And the first 2 lines introduce the concept of the poem. Love is like the rosebriar, friendship is like the holly tree. And then it goes on and says, the holly is dark when the rosebriar blooms, but which will bloom most constantly? So it puts this question in the reader's mind, and it's basically saying to you, which is better, love or friendship? And I think that is a controversial thing to have a discussion about, because what is better, love or friendship? That's a tricky one. So let's take a look at the second stanza. The first 2 lines here, the rosebriar is sweet in spring, its summer blossoms scent the air. And that's really talking about how wonderful love is, especially in the early days, like when the love itself is young, bright and full of life, like in the spring, which is when roses bloom. When you first encounter love, when you start loving someone, everything is just so beautiful and bright and colorful and smells great. It's just the most extraordinary experience a person can have, really. But then there's this turn in the second half of that stanza. Yet wait till winter comes again, and who will call the wild briar fair? So the winter, if we think about winter as like difficulty, and that is really the test of love, because it's easy to fall in love with someone and feel like you have this great partnership with them and you get along and you have similar interests or whatever's driving that initial burst of love. But when the winter comes, what's going to happen? When things get difficult, what's going to happen? And so here, this is where the poem starts to shift, because now we go from the summer, spring, beauty and wonderful scent of roses, and in the background there's this holly bush, or holly tree I should say, just slowly growing, doing its thing. It's not bright and flashy, it's not giving off a wonderful scent and catching the eye. No one is giving their girlfriends a holly wreath and saying, there you go, happy Valentine's Day. That's not how we think about hollies. So let's take a look at the third stanza. Then scorn the silly rose wreath now, and deck thee with holly's sheen, that when December blots thy brow, he may still leave thy garland green. So if you look at a holly tree, or the leaves of a holly, it has this really bright, colorful green color, but it has a waxy coating. Some leaves, when you look at them in the sunlight, they are sort of dull, even though they're green. They have a bit of a dull exterior, whereas holly leaves have this sort of like a wax. They almost look like plastic. And when you put them inside, or they are well illuminated by light, they really do have a good sheen, as the poem likes to say. So when things get difficult, Where is the passionate rose? If you look in a rose briar during the winter, you're not going to find much. It's just going to be dark. In the beginning of the poem, the holly is described as dark, but at the end of the poem, when it's wintertime, there's not going to be anything in the rose briar. But what is going to be there? The holly, who's been there the whole year, just slowly being with you, supporting you, being there. And I think that's really where the poem comes together at the end, because now we're looking at the difference between love and friendship, and true friendship. True, real friendship is going to be the one that is always there for you, and even in difficult times, they're going to be there to support you and still have that bright, glossy sheen and be ready. And love can come and go. I know when you're younger, that's kind of a difficult concept to consider, that love comes and goes. But it does. But a good friendship, that's going to be there through the difficult times. So I really like this poem because it does have that really interesting contrast between love and friendship. And so that's our poem. You'll also notice that the poem has a rather uneven rhyme scheme, like tree and constantly rhyme in the first stanza. So we have like a B, C, B sort of rhyme scheme. And then the next stanza, spring and again kind of rhyme. So that would be like a D, E sort of rhyme scheme. So the middle section has a solid rhyme scheme. And then we get to the end, now and brow, sheen and green. So it's almost like in the beginning there's no rhyme scheme, or at least not much of a rhyme scheme, just tree and constantly are rhyming with each other. But then as we get into the poem, that's when the rhyme scheme locks into place. And something that I've talked about with my students before is whenever you see the rhyme scheme change in a poem, you need to ask yourself, why has the author changed the rhyme scheme? And so why has the author changed the rhyme scheme? Because as we get deeper into the poem, we're starting to see how important the holly is. So it's almost like in the beginning it seems like the rose is more important, love is more important, but then as we go through the poem, they sort of switch places. And then as they switch places, that's when the rhyme scheme locks into place. It's a really cool poem. I like this poem a lot. So I hope that you enjoyed reading it as well. So let's talk about the poem you're going to write. I'm not going to get you to do something as complicated as this, where you are trying to interweave love and friendship. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write a 3-stanza poem with 4 lines each. So just like this poem, 3 stanzas, 4 lines, a total of 12 lines altogether. But what I want you to do is just pick love or friendship. It doesn't have to be love and friendship, just pick either one or the other. And what I would like you to do is the same thing that this poem does, where you make a simile or a metaphor to bring out the qualities of love or friendship. I'm not going to be too particular about the rhyme scheme, but what I've found when writing poems is that when you employ a rhyme scheme, it really forces you to think about what words you're going to use and which words will be most impactful and how do those words connect together. And ultimately that's what poetry is all about. That's why so many poets use rhyme, because it's almost like a restriction that forces you to really concentrate on your topic and find the best way to communicate that idea. So I wrote a poem that I'd like to share with you. I decided to write about friendship because I feel like after reading Love and Friendship, I really came away with a strong sense of the importance of friendship. And so my poem is going to make a metaphor out of friendship, comparing it to something else. Because remember, with similes and metaphors, what you're doing is you're comparing two things, but sort of coming at them sideways. Because you wouldn't think that holly and roses have much to do. Well, roses do seem to have a lot of connections to love, but I don't think many people are like, oh, holly, that's the friendship plant. So try to come up, if you're going to pick love or friendship, try to come up with an interesting and creative simile or metaphor, and try to ride that metaphor all the way through. So one way you should think about writing your poem is just think of some random thing, like a bowl of soup, a pair of shoes, the breeze in the afternoon, and then try to think how those things might have some similarities to your core subject. So the simile slash metaphor that I'm using in my poem is a pair of socks. So you might think to yourself, how does a pair of socks have anything to do with friendship? And that's the trick. That's the game that we're playing. How can you weave this idea together? So watch what I did. So here's my poem. This is my version of friendship, because friendship is like a pair of socks. They absorb your sweat, your fears. They protect you from cuts and rocks. And when you need them, they're always near. White or black or full of color, separated, rolled up, or mixed together, they stand out from the clutter and always make you feel better. When life doesn't feel as sweet, they keep you steady in your tracks, because when you have them on your feet, you know they also have your back. So that's a poem that I wrote. So if we look at the rhyme scheme that I employed, you'll see that I have A, B, A, B, and then I have C, 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 and then D, A, D, A. And you might say, tracks, back, socks, rocks. I'm doing something called a slant rhyme, where the CKS is really the thing, that the K sound is what I'm rhyming with. So I played around with this a little bit. So I tried to bring it back to the K sound for the socks. And the rhyme scheme was really just a good way for me to focus my attention and play around. But otherwise, when you think about it, your friends are the kinds of people that should be with you all the time. They should protect you. They should keep you warm and comfortable, just like socks do. So I want you to write a poem, again, 3 stanzas, 4 lines each, for a total of 12 lines. And I look forward to reading your poem on either love or friendship.